Hello everyone, welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say. And if there was ever a video where you should listen, this is that video. If you didn't know, this week is Banned Books Week, and Banned Books Week is essentially, it's kind of like a campaign to kind of remember, recognize all these books that have been historically banned across the United States. Typically, it's where content creators like myself, as well as other readers, criticize these book bans that are happening all across the states. I live in Illinois, and if you didn't know, Illinois is currently the first state in the US to outlaw book bans. In 2024, they are the first, which I'm happy for us, but it just makes me so frustrated and angry that book bans are not outlawed in more places, that they are normalized, and there are so many graphs that you can look at comparing the amount of book bans across all 50 states, and it's astonishing. And what you'll find is that a lot of these books are for young adults. They're for children. They're not necessarily books meant for adults. These book bans are happening in our public libraries and, more importantly, in our schools. So as a content creator that predominantly consumes books meant for younger audiences, I thought I would go through my personal library and take out every single book that has either been banned or challenged in the US. So I'm going to show you what my bookshelf looks like before I take out all these books, and then as I go through, I will name the book, give a brief summary about why it's banned and for what reasons. I'll also try to give a brief summary of what each book is about, but I can tell you right now, there are so many books that I have right now that are banned, and if I went through each and every one, this would be like a 2+ hour video. But I just want you to see what a potential library could look like without these books. I apologize in advance if I come across as being very angry or just emotional, but this is something that I truly cannot understand. And just looking at all these books, I've read most of these books that are banned, and looking at the reasons and thinking about what I gained from reading them, it truly astonishes me that there are children out there that don't have access to these books. And the reasons why just make me even more angry. So I'm going to apologize. I'm going to try to keep it together. But without further ado, let's go through my list of banned books. I also want to preface that I am referencing a variety of different sources, including PEN America, the American Library Association, among other sources, when looking up these books and finding out the status of whether or not they were challenged or banned. There's just a lot of resources, and I wanted to get as broad as I could with it to see exactly what kind of books are getting banned, where they're getting banned, and for what reasons. So the first book on this list is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. So this book has been banned for a number of reasons, including its inclusion of profanity, sexual references, and derogatory terms. This is a book I have yet to read, so I'm unfamiliar which term that they're talking about when they're referencing it in this ban. The general synopsis of this book is that it follows our main character, Noemi, a young socialite who is sent to investigate her cousin Catalina's mysterious letter about her abusive husband and the house where she lives. This book explores themes of colonialism and eugenics, as well as general race themes, and it has been banned in Texas. So here it is. Let's take it out. Can't read Mexican Gothic. Then I have 100 Years of Solitude. This book is by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I'm gonna specify now that this book won a Nobel Prize in literature. It was banned in North Carolina and California for its explicit content, sexual themes, and language. As I just mentioned, it won a Nobel Prize. It's a very critically acclaimed novel. I will say this was a book that I did DNF for this purpose. I did not enjoy the content of this book, but instead of advocating for no one to be able to read it, I just stopped reading it. I don't know, crazy concept. Anyway, no more 100 Years of Solitude. The next book I have is one that I got while I was in Portland. It is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. Cemetery Boys was banned in Florida, Tennessee, and Texas, presumably for its trans storyline. So Cemetery Boys is a romance featuring a Latinx character, and he is kind of like a brujo, a witch. He summons a ghost, and he essentially has to help him tie up some loose ends, all that ghostly like resolution kind of business. And it is a romance, so I wonder why it was banned in those states. This beautiful piece of literature now has to go. So into the pile it goes. Then we have SULA by Toni Morrison. Again, Toni Morrison is another Nobel Prize winning author. I have a few books from her on this list, and it's never a surprise, but it always makes me angry. SULA has been banned across the US for its sexual themes. I have read this book, so I'm going to gander that it's probably for its themes of promiscuity. But SULA is essentially a book. I read it kind of briefly a while ago, and I didn't really get a chance to absorb as much of it as I wanted to, but this book explores a lot of themes of womanhood and identity and criticizing the stigma against promiscuity with women. So it essentially follows the upbringing of the namesake of the book, SULA, and all the things that she does in her life, whether they are right and wrong, and her friendship with another girl that I am forgetting what her name is, but it's a very good book, and it does have very intense themes, which is not uncommon with a Toni Morrison novel. And I'm going to reserve some of my in-depth critiques that I want to go into, but I will just say generally, her use of these intense topics and sexual themes is not for shock value, and there is an explicit purpose in every single thing that she does. So to ban a book for these themes when it's literally the point, it makes me feel a certain type of way, and that way is angry. So anyway, let's say bye to SULA. Goodbye, SULA. Oh yeah, and this was also on Oprah's book club. So then we have another Toni Morrison novel that I have in my collection, which is The Bluest Eye. The Bluest Eye has been challenged in Oregon, North Carolina, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Texas. It has been banned for its content, including I made a video talking about these topics, and again, it is something that is very brutal and very hard to read and to consume in a book like this, but it is done purposefully, and it's done to make a point, and it's not done in a way that is careless or insensitive. If it makes you uncomfortable, that is the point. It is the story of Piccola Breedlove, and it's supposed to be a greater commentary about beauty standards and what we are teaching young Black girls about how they view themselves and their self-worth. Again, I made an entire review on that, so if you want more of an in-depth analysis, please feel free to watch that. But it's banned, so we'll never really know. Let's take it away from the library. Another Oprah's book club, because apparently Oprah and Toni Morrison were really close. So the next book was honestly kind of a surprise for me, because I feel like it really shaped the culture. It was a cultural moment, if you will. But the next book was not technically banned, but it has been challenged, and that is Coraline. Coraline by Neil Gaiman has been challenged because it was said to be unsuited for the age group and too scary for that age group. I mean, looking at the movie, it is kind of intense, but the book is aimed towards middle grade readers, so that's kind of I'm gonna say 8 to 12, maybe, that around that range. Again, not banned, but it has been challenged. So some groups have tried to get it removed from public libraries and or schools, but have failed to do so. But for the purpose of this video, we'll just go ahead and say that it can't be in our library because some people don't want it to be. Coraline, if you didn't know, if you never watched the movie, which you should have, if you haven't, you're missing out. Coraline is the story of this young girl finds an alternate universe where everything is as she wants it to be. But in order for her to stay in this idealistic world, she has to sew buttons onto her eyes. It is creepy, it is unnerving, but it is one of the greatest books and the greatest movie adaptations we've ever had. Unfortunately, this has to go. Bye-bye. Next on the list, we have The Color Purple by Alice Walker. The Color Purple has been banned across the US, but it was permanently banned in a school district in Florida. The Color Purple has been banned for a number of reasons, some of which I'll be listing now, including the sexual content, race, homosexuality, incest, violence, religious objections, and slang and profanity. This book was banned from school libraries across the United States between 1984 and 2013. It was banned for almost entirely 30 years. The book that we now have a musical version of and 2 different movie versions of. The Color Purple follows our main character, Celie, as she becomes the wife of this dude who's not very nice to her, and essentially her struggles with coming into her own, standing up for herself, becoming an independent woman, as well as discovering her own sexuality as she finds out she has an attraction to this other woman in the story. Her name is Shug Avery, and it's also a beautiful story following her and her sister and how much they love each other and their connection and their bond, which again, I've just read this book. It's amazing, and it's a book that I have reread throughout my years, and despite its cultural impact on the world, it cannot be in our library anymore, so let's get rid of it. This next one also kind of surprised me just because it like really popped off on the internet as of late, and this was a book that has been on my TBR for a really long time. I've yet to get to it, but next on our list is Shatter Me. This book is by, I hope I'm saying this right, but Tahera Mafi. I hope that is how you say that. If that is not, please correct me. Shatter Me is a YA dystopian novel, and it follows our main character who has never been able to touch anyone, and that's because I believe it's like when she touches people they die. And in this book she is locked up in an asylum where the big bad people in the world want to use her as a weapon. Shatter Me has been banned in Virginia for its use of violence, profanity, sexual content, and its social agenda. This book, this YA dystopian novel, was thought to push an anti-police propaganda. I'm so sad I didn't even get to read the book before I had to take it away from my library, but I guess we gotta. This one is not a surprise, but it still makes me angry. I feel like we are past this. Next we have HEARTSTOPPER. The entire series of HEARTSTOPPER has been banned. It was banned in Florida, Oregon, and Mississippi, again, for its discussion of racism and namely its inclusion of queer identities. HEARTSTOPPER, that being the book series that has a very popular Netflix adaptation of. There's fans across the world of HEARTSTOPPER. It is one of the most well-known books. You could ask anyone on the street and they would probably know what HEARTSTOPPER is. But it cannot be included in our library because God forbid we have boys kissing in a book. So this is volume 1, which has to go, but that also includes the volume 3 copy that I have, as well as Nick and Charlie, a HEARTSTOPPER novella. Anyway, if you don't know, HEARTSTOPPER follows the story of these 2 boys, Nick and Charlie, as they navigate their high school lives and their relationship. Very cute, very wonderful, and now we can't read it anymore. Next on the list, we have one of my favorite books that I've read this year, and that is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This book was banned in, surprise, surprise, Texas. Specifically, it was banned by Texarkana, which is a city in Texas. The independent school district banned this book, calling it obscene, and the obscenity is in reference to its inclusion of LGBTQ plus characters. It's also been challenged for its inclusion of EDI content. EDI standing for equity, diversity, and inclusion. I really question people when they look at something like EDI and say that it's harmful to have in a book. I said it once, I'm gonna say it again. We need diverse books. We need diverse books so we can, I don't know, not be stupid and say shit like that. They Both Die at the End is a very, very good book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. This book follows our 2 main characters, Mateo and Rufus, as they spend the last day of their life together. They get a call one night from Deathcast letting them know that sometime in the next 24 hours they will die. So they decide that they're going to spend the last 24 hours of their life together, making memories, you know, doing all the things that they wanted to do in life and they never had a chance to. It is their romance, it is their love story, and it is a wonderful book. Look at all these beautiful tabs and things that I wanted to look back on that now I can't. This next book I did purchase a while ago. It's a book that I read previously that I chose not to review on my channel because of the author. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the things that she's done, specifically ignoring her fans when talking about Palestine and her stance on the topic. I did want to include it on this list because it is a banned book, and the reasons that it's banned, I'm still critiquing book bans themselves, and whether or not I want to critique these books individually is a separate issue.
All right, this is Editing Kristen. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more on what I was trying to say because I did not say it the way I wanted to. I included this book in my list because the purpose of this video is to criticize book bans, and I'll go into it later on in a few minutes, but you'll see that the reason this book is banned is still problematic. I can critique this author separately, and I didn't want to do that in this video. I wanted to focus on the reasoning because that's still like the reason that it was banned is what I took issue with. Now, criticizing the author, talking about the things that she's done is still valid, and I can have that conversation in a separate video, and I can definitely go more into it, but right now I just wanted to focus on the ban itself.
Anyway, the next book is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. It was banned in Florida because it contains graphic violence, and some people say that it's very dark, mostly because one of the main characters in that series does come from a human trafficking background. So I can understand why that would be kind of sensitive for some people, but again, just because a topic is sensitive doesn't mean that you should ban it for everyone. Especially because another reason that was listed was its inclusion of queer characters. In the end, it always goes back to that, doesn't it? All right, Six of Crows. I'm not entirely sad to see you go because I was going to donate you anyway, but now I don't even get the choice to donate it because it's getting forcibly removed from my library. This next book, I was honestly kind of surprised just because, and this is like a separate headcanon I have, but this book arguably is a Christian fanfic, so I was really surprised to hear that it was banned, or at the very least challenged. I forgot to specify in my notes which it was, but the next book is Divergent by Veronica Roth. Divergent was banned in Oregon for being too violent or too mature. It wasn't specified completely why it was banned, but this like too violent or too mature reasoning for banning books is not uncommon, and it has come up on the list before, so it's probably why. I thought that of all the books to escape a book ban, Divergent would survive, but apparently not even that. Now, the next big 3 YA dystopian to make this list is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Everyone knows what The Hunger Games is about, so I don't need to tell you, but it was banned in Texas and New Hampshire. It has been banned and challenged for a number of reasons, including the inclusion of violence because it's quote-unquote a war trilogy. It's been accused of being anti-family, anti-ethnic, having offensive language, being occult or satanic, and a number of reasons. But I am going to go out on a limb and say that the reason it's banned is probably for its critique of government, capitalism, class divide, amongst a myriad of other topics that directly criticize our own world. I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe they don't want other people to say, hey, remember who the real enemy is, and then be like, oh my god, it's not us normal people, maybe it's the gut. And that's how I get banned from YouTube, so let me not say that. Anyway, yeah, but you know what it is, you know what we're about here. Goodbye to The Hunger Games, one of the most influential books of our generation. Next, we have one of my favorite adult books, and this is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I had to read this when I did a study abroad trip in Paris, and I immediately fell in love. I really took to this book. I've recommended to literally anyone that would listen, but come to find out that it has been banned and challenged across the US for, surprise, surprise, its inclusion of homosexuality. Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin is a book about a man and his lover, and it all takes place on one day, the day that his lover, Giovanni, is going to be executed. It explores his struggle with his own sexuality, letting the love of his life slip away from him, and all of his regrets and choices that he makes throughout his life. I love James Baldwin. His writing style is beautiful. I could talk about it for hours. I could study it for literally the rest of my life and never be able to fully emulate his writing style. It is so unique. It's so full of life, and no one will ever get to experience it because it's banned. Next on this list, we have The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. It has a chokehold on me, and I don't know why. It's just like a book that really speaks to me, and it's a book that I didn't fully understand until I read it literally the 5th time in high school. And it's a book that, as I continue to reread it, I'm still uncovering new things about it. Here it is. The spine is all messed up, and it's a very tiny book, but again, one of my favorites. The Catcher in the Rye has been banned across the US for its inclusion of excessive vulgar language, sexual scenes, things concerning moral issues, excessive violence, apparently communism, and other things. The Catcher in the Rye is a coming-of-age novel, and it kind of talks about like not wanting to grow up and this fear of growing up, this transitional period when you turn from a young adult to an adult. And this book is meant to be comedic at some times, but it does have an underlying theme and message, and it's a part of a lot of curriculums in the US. But despite being considered a classic, we can no longer read it. Now, another no-brainer, another I'm not surprised, but I'm still angry about it. The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This book has been banned in Texas, Kansas, Missouri, and Pennsylvania. The Hate You Give was one of the top 10 banned books in the US from 2017, 2018, 2020, and 2021, and it was banned for its discussion of racism and anti-police views. This book has won an award, I forget which one it is, but The Hate You Give, if you didn't know already, is a book featuring our main character, Star Carter. She sees one of her best friends being murdered by police. The story just follows her as she struggles with herself about speaking up, confronting her own friend groups and their racism and the things that she's learned to be okay with, and learning to stick up for herself and doing what she believes is right. It's also a very popular movie, and I wonder why it was banned in 2020. Does that year sound familiar to you? I wonder why. Anyway, a very, very, very good book, but we can no longer read it. I'm running out of space on my side table here for the banned books. The next one has a very long list, and again, it's not a surprise. The next one is Beloved by Toni Morrison. I have 3 Toni Morrison novels in my library, which, if anything, just goes to show how influential of an author she is. Beloved has been banned in Tennessee, Nebraska, Kentucky, Michigan, and Idaho. Oh, I'm sorry, it was challenged. I don't think it was officially banned, but it was challenged. So it was challenged for its commentary on racism, the sexual content, apparently for using God's name in vain, and its discussion of societal issues, which is purposeful. Beloved, I think, was the book that won her the Nobel Prize for Literature. I could be wrong. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but Beloved was a book that I read when I was in high school, and I reread again for another college class. Both times it was a part of the curriculum, and it provided so much insight and perspective that you truly cannot get from any other book besides this one, because this is educational. This has something to contribute, and yet some people don't want to learn. So we can't have it anymore. Next book on the list is one that I read recently. I'm not a fan of this author particularly, although I'm like kind of warming up to him. Anyway, this book is A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. A Farewell to Arms was banned in Texas and Massachusetts, mainly for its honest depiction of war. It's anti-war propaganda, quote unquote. I'm using propaganda very lightly. What happens in this book is a very real depiction of what happened during World War II. A Farewell to Arms follows our main character, who he's in the war and he gets injured, and he falls in love with a nurse, and eventually he has to go back and serve after he recovers. And it's really meant to criticize, again, the deploying of soldiers, the kind of conditions that they were forced to fight in. It also talks about the retreat of the Italian military. If the Vietnam War taught us anything, it's that sometimes the US doesn't necessarily like when people oppose war. So this book is banned. This is a poetry book. I don't own many of them, but I read a few of the poems. I haven't read the entire book. This is And Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. There are so many poems from this book that I feel are quoted a lot in the book community. It was banned in Texas and Florida for its inclusion of sexual content, offensive language, its religious viewpoints, LGBTQIA content, violence, racism, and use of illegal substances. So this is a collection of poems about, not necessarily about Maya Angelou, but a lot of it is like from her perspective, her experiences. My favorite poem is, I guess, like the namesake, it's Still I Rise. Again, I read it for curriculum. I read it for my high school education. I didn't read the full book, but that was one of the poems that was highlighted from this book. It is very powerful. Her writing is so spectacular. You know, we'll never be able to enjoy it because apparently the content is too inappropriate. So it is banned. The next is not a surprise in the slightest. This is the autobiography of Malcolm X. I have a problem with this book being banned because the general rhetoric surrounding Malcolm X is that he was an extremist. He is like the antithesis of Martin Luther King Jr. When I was learning about him, he's portrayed as like the villain, the bad guy of the civil rights movement. But I read his autobiography for a college class that I took, but this book really gave me a lot of perspective. Again, it's his autobiography, and he talks a lot about like when he was growing up and the stigmas he was dealing with, his own internalized racism, how he would straighten his hair so it wouldn't be curly. He talks a lot about the things that he would do to kind of assimilate. It is a very long book, very, very long book, but I did enjoy reading this. This, I couldn't find a ton of information, so I'm not 100% if this book was banned, but supposedly it's banned in 6 states, including Arizona, Texas, and Tennessee, and apparently it was banned for its inclusion of critical race theory. But next we have Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I'm sorry, I like blinked for a second. Winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature. That's 3 Nobel Prize winning novels on a banned book list. It's been challenged and banned for a number of reasons, including sexual content and its inclusion of organ donation, because that's like the main thing of this book. This book is about a society in which they clone people for the express purpose of using their organs for donation. It was one of my favorite books that I've ever been forced to read for a curriculum. I mean, force is not the right word, but anyway, this was a part of my curriculum and I actually enjoyed reading it. Again, it's supposed to be a critique on our society, and there's so many like good themes and messaging in this book, and I would love to make a review, and I might in the future, but I definitely can't do that now because it is banned and we have to get rid of it. The next book we have is Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. That should sound familiar to you because Alison Bechdel is the person that coined the Bechdel test. You know, the test that determines whether or not a piece of media has good representation of women, where the rules are only you need to have 2 female characters that have names and have a conversation about anything other than a man. This is interesting to me because it's a memoir. It's a graphic novel. Oh, let me not show the pictures because ironically, the reason why it's banned is for its explicit content, including nudity. And if I show it on YouTube, this will probably get demonetized. Funny how that works, huh? Anyway, this is a memoir of her life, and they are censoring her life. People can't even like talk about their own experiences, even though they're hard and they're real, and they talk about how they've overcome all the things they went through in their childhood because it's too graphic. Anyway, Fun Home, which is also a musical, by the way, is banned. Oh yeah, and let's not forget that it was also banned for its inclusion of LGBTQ themes. This next book is apparently like one of the top books that is banned. Like consistently, it's a banned book, always. And when I heard this, I was kind of surprised because this was a book that I did read and review on the channel, and I did mention that it was a little risque. But to find out that it was banned for this reason, and it's consistently banned for this reason, definitely surprised me. And this book is Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. Again, you can watch my full review of that, but Me and Earl and the Dying Girl is about our main character who befriends a girl that has leukemia and how their friendship blossoms and how he deals with her eventual death. It was banned in 21 school districts, including in Florida, Virginia, Oregon, Maine, Missouri, North Carolina, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, South Carolina. That's a lot of places for this one book. It was banned for its sexual content, language, obscenity. Apparently, people are equating this book to pornography, which I can tell you, in no world does it reference anatomy occasionally. Yeah, but it's like, how do we make that leap? This is a literal book. I promise you, there are books out there that are pornography. And that is Icebreaker, any Colleen Hoover book. Those, I give it to you. I give it to you. This is not. That is actually insane to me. Anyway, this book is banned. Next, this book is very near and dear to my heart. This book is special to me because it was one that I was not allowed to read when I was in school. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I was a gifted kid. I was in accelerated reading classes most of my life. While a lot of my other classmates got to read this book, I didn't because it was seen as like below my reading level. So I missed out on reading a book that was really impactful to me, you know, reading later on in life as an adult, and a book that was just good. It was just nice and it was fun to read, and I didn't get to. And like having a book that I knew I couldn't read and then finally reading it once I had the freedom to do so, it really makes me even more angry that it's a part of a book ban. And that book is The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. This book has been banned apparently because it deals with sensitive topics including poverty, racism, sexuality, domestic violence, puberty, and sexual harassment. Which I find it ironic that puberty is a reason to ban the book because so many young adult and middle grade literature deal with this topic because, I don't know, maybe everyone goes through puberty, and reading books that talk about that scary transition is actually really comforting to young adults going through that transition. I don't know, but it's the story of this girl as she lives in her house on Mango Street and just her experiences growing up. And again, it does deal with a lot of those sensitive topics, but it's very real, it's very raw, and it's not done in a way that is for shock value or meant to be harmful. Next, we have a book that was ironically, again, on a reading list when I was in high school, and this is Rethinking Normal by Katie Rain Hill. I believe that is her full name. This book is actually a memoir documenting her transition, her struggles. I believe it's also her love story. I didn't read all of it. I've only gone through 25%, about this much. This book has been banned because of its sexual situations or dialogue, violence or negativity, and being too depressing, supposedly. I'm gonna go ahead and say that that's probably not the reason. I'm gonna go ahead and say that it's because it is a memoir about her transition. Another person that can't talk about her own life because it's quote unquote controversial and people shouldn't read about it. The next book I have on my list is one that is on my TBR, and I've been kind of conflicted about covering it on the channel because I haven't read it, but I know what it's about, and I don't know how delicately I could approach a topic like this. I have a lot of my own opinions and things that I would like to say on this topic, but just like trying to figure out how to go about it and how to, you know, give it the amount of like care that it deserves and to be delicate about it while still being impactful is something that I'm not entirely sure I could achieve at this point, although I would like to. But this book is This Is Where It Ends. This book you've probably seen before, but it does deal with, you know, school incidents, and that is primarily why this book has been banned. Again, I have not read it, but some people felt that it did not handle the subject matter as delicately as it should have. Another very sensitive topic, but whether or not someone is willing or able to read through this book and discern what greater commentary it's meant to be making, they no longer can because it is banned. Then we have The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This book has been banned in Florida, presumably again for its inclusion of LGBTQ themes. This reasoning is very common in this list. Any book that has anything to say or any inclusion of LGBTQ characters is immediately going to go on a banned books list. I would like to think that we are past that as a society, but apparently not. Oh, look at that. It won another prize. It's a book that literally everyone cries about. It's so influential. It's one of my favorite books, and now I can never recommend it to you because it's banned. Next, we have Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, and by extension, its sequel, Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. It has been banned, surprise, surprise, for its depiction of homosexuality, and apparently as well for its references to drugs and sex. It follows our two main characters, Aristotle and Dante, as they discover their friendship, their feelings, and really, like, it's also a book about masculinity be and how to define it, and just like being okay with yourself. It was written by Benjamin Alire Science. He is one of my favorite authors of all time. I think if I met him, I would cry. I have so many books written by him, and now they all have to go. Then we have Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This book has been banned across the US for its language, sexual content, and for its feminist messaging, supposedly. This book is on my TBR list. I haven't had a chance to read it, but again, this is another very influential book in modern literature. Zora Neale Hurston, I haven't read any of her work. I have been recommended her books frequently. As in typical fashion with a lot of the people of color on this list, this book is banned. Then we have the very first book that I reviewed on this channel for this specific reason. Ironically, I bought this book because it was in a banned books display last year. I picked it up, I was really interested, and it was the first book that I reviewed on this channel, and that is They Called Us Enemy. This book was written by George Takei. He is one of the famous actors from Star Trek, and this book is, again, the story of his life as he lived in a Japanese internment camp. I'm gonna venture and say that it's probably because it's a very real and impactful depiction of Japanese internment. And as I said in that review, when I was in school, when I was learning about World War II, in the same breath that a lot of my teachers would say like, oh my God, the Nazis, Germany, concentration camps, those were awful, like how could they do that? Then they wouldn't teach about the Japanese internment camps that we had in the US. The very same things that they were doing in Germany, we did here. Imprisoning Japanese Americans solely because they're Japanese. And this is a real life person, someone that is still alive today, talking about this experience, and it is banned. Getting to the bottom of the list. Finally. Then we have Looking for Alaska by John Green, a Michael Prince Award for Excellence in Young Adult Literature. I'm going to preface, I don't like this book. This is not a book that I would recommend, and I haven't read it in a while, but in general, I just don't like John Green novels that much. Anyway, it's banned apparently for its LGBTQIA content and sexual themes, as well as its offensive language, drug use, and supposedly it's unsuited for its targeted age group, that being young adult. This book is about our main character. His name is Pudge, aka Miles. He's going to a boarding school and he has this group of friends, including our main girl, Alaska. Eventually, Alaska, presumably, she unalives herself. This book is a coming of age novel. Again, not my favorite book. I would not recommend it, but I would not go on a limb and say that it should be banned. And now, the final book on my list. I'm going to specify that this book was challenged, but it has not been formally banned. And this is The Book Thief. It's been challenged for a variety of reasons, including sensitive content and challenging themes, that being World War II, death, and specifically having it from a child's perspective. It's been stated as being too heavy for its age group. Again, I find funny that this is a challenged book because the whole plot of this book is that our main girl is stealing books before they can be burned by Nazis in Germany. It's not ironic to anyone? No, just me? Okay. Anyway, I can't believe I forgot this book, and it was literally the main reason that I remembered to make this video. And that is, surprise, surprise, Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Imide. This book has been banned because the main plot of this story is that these are two black students in an all-white school, and they are being targeted and essentially forced to leave the school, and it has underlying themes of racism, and yeah, it's been banned from school libraries. This book rewired, restructured my brain chemistry, and it is banned. That is the list of all the banned books that I have. So now let's take a look at my bookshelf. Let's stack up all my books so you can see what they look like. Everything that was taken away. This is the stack of all the banned books that are in my personal library. I have it propped up on a table. You can't even see the bottom. I am standing up. It's not as tall as me, but it's about half my height. My intention with making this video and giving you a visual representation of what we lose when we ban books is so you can see just the minute, just this like in this controlled space, the amount of damage and harm that book bans can do, especially to young minds. You deprive them of these stories. You decide that this one aspect of the story completely discredits all the other important messaging that goes into it. Suddenly, it doesn't matter that Nick and Charlie are young adults learning to navigate high school, learning to navigate societal pressure. Now it's just, hey, they're gay and I don't want people to see that. And suddenly that becomes more important. Most of these books, as I've already mentioned, are a part of a curriculum. They provide education. And the day that we decide that our own quote unquote beliefs overrule any educational benefit is the day that we lose as a society. As I've said, and as I will continue to say, just because you don't like a book and you don't agree with it doesn't mean that you get to decide for the rest of us. So if you're asking yourself, what can I do about book bans? Well, there's a number of ways that you can help. First and foremost, advocating. It is Banned Books Week right now, and this is the week where more people are talking about this topic. Go to your local government, talk to them. They represent us as individuals. It's important that they know on any scale that we are against book bans, especially when it comes to book bans in school libraries and public libraries. Those are supposed to be our community resources. And if we can't even rely that they will have all the content that we want to consume, then what are we doing? What are we doing as a collective society? All the books that I just showed you are wonderful. I could say so many amazing things. I could give glorious reviews about each and every one. To think that somewhere, probably in Texas or Florida, kids can access these exact books that have shaped my childhood, that have shaped so many other people's lives, is sad. Illinois is the first state to outlaw book bans, but they will not be the last. So it's up to us. We got to speak out. We got to talk to our legislators and make sure that we get rid of these book bans because quite frankly, they're ridiculous. Overall, I leave you with read books. Advocate for reading books. Whether or not people want to believe it, people read books, and books are influential and they shape our society. So we should have access. We should have the choice to read whatever book we want. So with that being said, that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you'll take something from this, and I hope that when you go to your local library, when you look at the books that you own, that you think about what you've gained, what you've learned from your reading. And I hope that you advocate for that same opportunity for our younger generation. And I'm so happy that I get to put these books back in my library and that I have the option and the opportunity to reread them as much as I want and talk about them on this platform and recommend them to everyone that watches these videos because, you know, that's not something that everyone can do. I've said it once and I'll say it again. We need diverse books. And that's why I truly enjoy organizations like We Need Diverse Books because they truly go above and beyond to do this exact thing, that is advocating for more diverse stories in school libraries, in our public libraries. If you want to support them, I highly encourage it, as well as PEN America and the American Library Association. I'm surprised I kept it together. This really does, it makes me emotional to think that some of my most favorite books could not be consumed by kids in some of these states that decide that just because it has LGBTQ or other themes that they have no value. But I will not shut up about it. I will never stop advocating against book bans, and I hope that to the young queer generation that is growing up and they want access to books like these, that maybe one day we can get to a point where it will never be a question about whether or not these books will be in their library. But anyway, that's the end of the video. I am going to fix my bookshelf, put everything back, and yeah. So thank you so much for watching. Celebrate Banned Books Week 2024. Yay!